Hello all. Welcome to New York State NAMI, our policy lunch and learn for September 5th, 2025. Normally our lunch and learns are the first Monday of the month, but due to Labor Day, we moved it to the Friday. I'm James Norman, the Government and Community Affairs Manager for NAMI New York State. The NAMI New York State Policy Lunch and Learns were started as a way to help educate our members about complex policy issues to help better prepare them to talk to legislators, their local folks, and make them more aware of resources that are available throughout the state. We have a number of these coming up. Our last one was on mental health parity. And if you go to our NAMI New York State website under Advocacy, you can see the recording. This recording will be there as well. Our next session will be focused on mental health courts, and registration for that shall be going out shortly, and we'll include it in the chat at the end of the session. With that, we want to thank one of our partners on a bill regarding TDI. We'll start with talking about the temporary disability insurance program, paid family leave programs, before we get into the policy areas. With that, I will turn over to A Better Balance. And thank you all for presenting.
Thank you, James, and thank you everybody for having us here today. My name is Jesse Workman, and I'm a senior staff attorney at A Better Balance, and I'm going to be doing this presentation alongside my colleague, Mariah Engelberg. I'll pass it over to her for introductions, and then I will start us off.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. We're really excited to dig into this with everybody. And my name is Mariah, and I'm an organizer at A Better Balance, and I'm working on improving our temporary disability insurance program, also known as TDI. We'll get into that a little bit more. But before I started this job, I was a case manager. So sometimes just wanted to share. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mariah. So again, we work at A Better Balance, and A Better Balance is a national nonprofit work family legal advocacy organization. We have offices in New York, Tennessee, Colorado, and DC, and we work across the country on policy, litigation, and we also have a helpline. And all of our work is connected to making sure that individuals and families are able to take care of themselves and their loved ones when they need time off work, and also when needing accommodations. And the core of our mission is to make sure that all workers are able to care for themselves and the people they love when they need to be able to take time off work without sacrificing stability and financial security. And Mariah and I both focus a lot of our work on New York, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We'll be overviewing New York's family leave program as well as our temporary disability insurance program. So James mentioned this, and I'll just say it again. We're going to overview New York's paid medical leave program. We're going to talk about paid family leave and then New York's paid medical leave program, TDI, and talk about the differences between the two programs, and then really focus on our efforts to reform temporary disability insurance through bills S-172 in the Senate and A-84 in the Assembly. And then we'll have time for question and answers. All right, so I'm going to start off by just talking. Oh, I want to say one thing first. I am an attorney, and I just want to name that none of what we're sharing here constitutes legal advice, but we will be talking through legal information, and we will have time at the end for people to ask questions. And we do have a helpline. The number is listed at the bottom of this slide for anyone who has individualized questions that we can do questions at the end, but if you need more information, our helpline is a great resource for all things leave related, workplace leave related. And we'll get into a little bit more about what our helpline does towards the end. So New York has a paid family leave program and also a medical leave program. And New York's medical leave program is called temporary disability insurance, or TDI. I'm going to ask a few interactive questions here in the beginning, just to kind of assess what the knowledge is in the room and to know where to go in this training. So can anybody tell me the difference between temporary disability insurance and paid family leave? Like, when is the time that you would use one versus the other?
Maternity leave for paid family?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. parental leave or maternity leave is one of the uses of paid family leave. And anybody have any sense around temporary disability insurance when a person might use that?
Injury? I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I'm
that's
not
exactly
sure.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
serious illness or injury. So the way that,
I had temporary disability insurance before I went on permanent disability insurance.
okay, great. And how would you describe, if you're comfortable? I also have to say, because I'm in presentation mode, I can't see people's faces, so I'm just listening, but how would you describe the need for temporary disability insurance just broadly?
I would describe it as, first of all, it's something like, say you break your wrist and you need to type for your work. You would need temporary disability. But it's also a precursor to long-term disability. You have to have short-term disability to pay your bills before you qualify for long-term disability. And also, long-term disability is not a guaranteed thing, whereas short-term disability is easier to get.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing all of that. So the way that I think about it is temporary disability insurance it's just New York's name for medical leave. And medical leave is used when a person needs to take care of themselves. So when there's some sort of serious illness or injury, this includes a range of conditions, including mental health conditions, substance use disorder, and other conditions. It's the need to take care of oneself. Whereas paid family leave is the need to take care of another person. So that can be parental leave or maternity leave, bonding with a baby or new child. It also applies when someone has like a foster kid or has adopted a child, or when one is taking care of a loved one with a serious illness. So that distinction, taking care of myself is medical leave versus taking care of another person is paid family leave. And in most states with paid family and medical leave programs, the two are combined. They're just one program. New York happens to be a bit more complicated. We have this old temporary disability insurance program that has existed since the late 40s. And then in 2016, we created paid family leave. And so the two programs are disparate. They're not equal to each other, which is a big part of what we're going to talk about today. And also they're separate. So they operate independently, somewhat independently anyways. So does anybody have any idea what the benefit amount is for either of those programs? Like if one qualifies for temporary disability insurance or paid family leave and applies for the program, does anybody know what what the wage replacement rate is for either program? And it would be great if people want to guess.
Ugh. 2/3 of your I don't know. 2/3 maybe?
It's also according to if you've been paying into a temporary disability fund. So, for example, where I worked, I could have paid and gotten 3 times my paycheck
Oh,
for temporary disability. Which
Yeah, so
was
I want to take both of those, one and then the other. So the first one, 2/3, it is around 2/3 for paid family leave. So for our paid family leave program, you know what? I'm going to skip to the next slide so that you all can see the numbers. Before I jump into the benefit amount, those two thoughts are helpful. Does anybody have any sense of whether job protection or continued health insurance exist in either of those programs?
yes, it does.
You said yes?
Yes.
Okay, so this next slide, I just don't want to confuse us by throwing things out without you seeing the numbers, goes over the differences between the two. So for paid family leave, 2/3 is correct. It's around 67% of average weekly wage up to a cap of $1,177 a week. And that's around a $95,000 a year earner. So it's capped there. Temporary disability insurance, on the other hand, is only 50% of the average weekly wage, but it's capped at $170 a week. And we're going to talk about this a lot more later, but that number hasn't changed since 1989. So it's stuck at this extremely low, unlivable amount. Whereas because paid family leave it's created in 2016 and has been updated more recently, it's not that $1,177 is necessarily what it should be for everyone, or living on 67% of one's income or less is not it's not ideal, but it's certainly a lot more livable than $170 a week. And for paid family leave, there's job protection and there's continued health insurance. Whereas for temporary disability insurance, there's no job protection, no continued health insurance, and no intermittent leave. And intermittent leave is the ability to take a couple days at a time. So it's not in increments of hours, but it's in one day or more. So if somebody is, let's say, recovering from cancer or doing cancer treatments, it needs to be able to take a couple days and then work for a week and then take a few more days and then work. That's not possible in our current temporary disability insurance. Whereas for paid family leave, intermittent leave exists. And all of these things, I mean, of course, it's really hard to rely on a program if you might lose your job, not be able to have continued health insurance in the middle of a health emergency, and only be living on $170 a week. And that's part of why we are trying to change temporary disability insurance and modernize it, bring it at least up to par with paid family leave, which Mariah is going to talk about more. I wanted to also get at the other piece that you named, though. We all pay into both of these programs. So all workers who are W-2 employees automatically pay into temporary disability insurance and into paid family leave. Some employers may offer more benefits, and there may be a temporary disability insurance program that people are paying more money into, but all W-2 earners in New York pay into both programs. And so everyone is eligible. Everyone who is a W-2 worker, contracted workers there's a slightly more complicated process for eligibility. But for W-2 employees, everyone is theoretically eligible if they qualify for these programs and is paying in automatically. It's automatically withdrawn from the check. So like I said before, temporary disability insurance is New York's medical leave program. TDI provides regular payments to people who are temporarily unable to work due to off-the-job serious illness or injury, and it includes pregnancy-related disabilities, mental health crisis, substance use issues, or medical conditions like cancer, but certainly not limited to cancer. It could be any kind of surgery. We'll talk a little bit more about what qualifies as a serious illness in a couple of slides. But the compensation that is provided is only up to $170 a week, and that's taxed, so it ends up being less that people are actually taking home for up to 26 weeks. There's no job protection or continuation of health insurance, though some laws may require the employer to hold a worker's job, like the FMLA, but that takes the cross qualification. It's not eligible under TDI. There's no intermittent leave. There's a 7-day waiting period, meaning that, and this is not true in paid family leave, but it means that for 7 days, basically a person loses a week of pay before they're able to get benefits from TDI. And the disability can't be work related, so it has to be an off the job injury as opposed to workman's comp. So who is eligible? A person must be employed or recently employed in New York State, have worked for the employer for 4 weeks or more in a row if they're full-time, or at least 25 days if they're part-time. Government workers are not eligible, and nearly all non-government employees, that is W-2 employees, are covered. If you have more specific questions about your employer, a lot of times we hear from people who are being told that they're not eligible for various reasons. You can call our helpline. And I want to just say here, for independent contractors, so anyone who has a 1099, there is a path to eligibility, but it takes proactively signing up for the program. And once a person signs up, then they can pay into both. And there's a ridiculously long waiting period there's a 2-year waiting period if one doesn't sign up in the first 6 months of being quote unquote self-employed or being an independent contractor. And if anybody has more questions specifically about the independent contractor piece, we can share more about that later, and we can also point people to other resources. TDI can be used for mental health and is often used for treating mental health conditions. So in order to be eligible, there needs to be a serious health condition. That's an illness, injury, impairment, or physical or mental condition that involves either an inpatient hospitalization. It could be a residential care facility or in a hospital, or continuing treatment supervised by a healthcare provider. So that includes mental health treatment, treatment for substance use disorder, and it doesn't take both. It just takes one or the other. So if a person is receiving ongoing treatment, it's it's very possible to likely that they are eligible for TDI. It is an individualized assessment. So it's a case by case basis, and it's assessed to see whether somebody does qualify. I want to share a little bit about TDI and pregnancy. TDI, so 1/3 of claims for temporary disability insurance are for pregnancy related conditions, including during pregnancy, childbirth, and then the postpartum period. So, months to a year after a birth. And pregnant workers are automatically eligible for the last 4 weeks up to a due date. So there's no additional requirement. Like one doesn't need to show a serious health condition aside from just being in the last 4 weeks of pregnancy. And that's also true for the 6 to 8 weeks after birth, depending on the delivery method. So for C-section, it's 8 weeks, and for otherwise, it's 6 weeks. And temporary disability insurance can also be used to help manage the symptoms of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And when I was a kid, we just called this postpartum depression, but people may be familiar that it's much more expansive than that. It includes depression, anxiety, postpartum psychosis, and also mental health conditions that occur during pregnancy. And TDI can be a significant support for being able to take extra time to address those conditions. How does one apply? So you can scan this to see what the website looks like, and employers may have different processes, but there is a state website. Oh, one other thing I want to say before I talk about how the application process works is just how this program functions. We didn't mention this yet. So this is true for New York's paid family leave program and its paid medical leave program, and it's different in New York than many other states. We do these programs as insurance. So when we talk about paying in, when there's an amount that's coming out of everybody's check, that's going towards the premiums for these programs. So it's everybody pays in, and then if a person is eligible, then they're taking out of the insurance program. But some states, it functions as a state fund where the state is paying out the claims, and New York does it differently. It's through insurance, which is in the name, temporary disability insurance, but it's also how our paid family leave program functions. And paid family leave is covered entirely by workers. So 100% of the premiums for paid family leave are paid by workers. Temporary disability insurance is split between workers and employers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the legislation that we're trying to pass. But it is an insurance program. So there's a state website that people can apply through, and you can scan this QR code to see what it's like. And then employers have their own processes. And a lot of times we hear questions from people about what type of information needs to be disclosed when they're going through the process. There is the documentation of the medical condition is required, and this includes diagnosis and symptoms. The form does go back to the claimant to give to the employer. So the employer sees what the medical provider has listed. And what we suggest when people are concerned about over disclosure of their medical information is just to work with their provider to give limited information. Again, that's something that if anybody has questions about that, they can call our helpline, or we can talk more about that at the end if there are questions. But there is a documentation requirement, and it comes from a medical provider. This is a list of providers that paperwork can come from. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Mariah to talk a little bit more about the changes that we're trying to make to temporary disability insurance and just go over some of the basics one more time.
Thanks, Jesse. Thank you, everybody. So I think this can be really confusing because there's a lot of acronyms, and also I think on some level it feels very confusing that we have these two separate programs. But just to kind of recap really briefly, if you yourself are going through a mental health crisis or a substance use disorder and need to go into detox, anything like that, if you are the person who's experiencing that, you're taking temporary disability insurance. If you are taking care of another person, in addition to bonding with a new child, you're taking paid family leave. So if you are the person who's going through any kind of crisis, you're stuck with this really subpar program that's $170 a week. You can't take that leave intermittently. You don't have job protection and you don't have continued health insurance. And when when mental health and substance use disorder are as stigmatized as they are, this is clearly like not a workable program, because everybody deserves to be able to take time off of work to care for themselves at any point, and especially when there's just so much stigma attached to mental health. But just to really kind of recap that, if you yourself are the person who maybe you've broken a wrist, maybe you've gone through a depressive episode, anything like that, you're stuck with that TDI program. But if you're the caretaker, you have PFL, paid family leave, which provides you with really more comprehensive benefits. But that being said, I do also want to kind of give us a little bit more of an understanding of like the rest of the landscape. And Jesse, if you could go to the next slide. The idea, like, I just to give people a little bit of hope too, is that it is really possible for New York to have a robust paid medical leave program. In fact, of all of the other states, including DC, that offer paid medical leave and paid family leave, New York is at the very, very, very end, and like coming in dead last. For example, New Jersey, our neighboring state, offers, $1,081 a week if you are taking TDI or taking paid family leave. And then New York, as you can see on this graph, is just like completely stuck at the bottom at 170. So there are like other states do provide workers with both paid medical leave and paid family leave. Although we've been stuck at this level just because the bill hasn't changed since 1989, meaning the TDI program hasn't changed in 1989. It doesn't mean what we're going to be stuck there forever. But it is, I think, useful to just see that like A, New York is far behind, but B, that this is not something other states are doing this, and New York should be able to kind of follow up with being able to provide their workers with the proper paid medical leave that folks deserve. And if you could go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about how the actual policy and the plans that we have. Yeah.
On the last slide, what do the asterisks mean?
The asterisk means that it's not happened. Like for Minnesota, this hasn't happened yet. I think some of these are being implemented in 2027 or 2026. So I should have put that in there. But like, for example, if it doesn't have an asterisk, it means that it's already implemented and happening. And some of the ones with asterisks are just meaning that like the bill has been signed, but the actual law hasn't started yet. And it won't start.
You.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, feel free to jump in, honestly. But I think one of the things that can feel really hard is that we've been sort of stuck at this $170 a week level since 1989. This bill hasn't been changed since then. And I think one of the things that is sort of interesting is that when policy and lawmakers were writing this bill, they actually wrote in $170 into the bill language, which hasn't obviously changed for inflation. And $170 a week may have been enough to survive in 1989, but it is certainly nowhere near enough to survive on in 2025, particularly when you have all of these other medical bills that are mounting, and people can and sometimes do lose their job. So this $170 a week is simply like a completely unworkable program. So one of the things that we've been working on, and NAMI has been a really fantastic supporter in this, is trying to bring the TDI level up to what our paid family leave level is. So we don't have this disparity between you get 170 if you're sick, ill, or injured versus nearly $1,200 if you're taking care of another person. And I can get a little bit into this bill, which is sponsored by Assemblymember Szilagyi. In the Assembly, it's Bill A84. In the Senate, it's S172, and it is sponsored by Senator Ramos. And the idea is that we're going to have a TDI program that really matches up to the paid family leave program. So it takes away that $170 a week cap. And instead of writing a number into the bill, it would mean that this number would rise and fall with most likely rise according to inflation. So we have that, like, as Christine said earlier, that 2/3 number. So it would be 67% of your paycheck, rather than just putting in that bill number or putting in that dollar amount. So it would change as cost of living, et cetera, also changes. Another really important thing that this bill would include is allowing people the ability to take intermittent leave. This is incredibly important for basically anybody who has managing any chronic illness. But the ability to kind of, if you need to take a week off here and there, if you have, maybe you need to take off a day of every month to get labs drawn for any kind of medical or mental health condition, anything like that would just really allow people to do that, because right now intermittent leave is not provided. Other key parts are just that people would be guaranteed to have their job when they return back to work. Sometimes people really need to take, for example, obviously a lot of substance use, like detoxes, are 28 days. If you need to take that 28 days off of work, to know that your job is going to be there for you when you return. So having that job protection, and then potentially just as important is making sure that people will continue to have their health insurance. If you're in the hospital, I cannot think of a more important time to have your health insurance. So just ensuring that people's health insurance, job, and have a higher wage replacement than this $170. So we've been working, and just to give a really brief, super brief information on what's been going on, is A Better Balance and NAMI and a bunch of other coalition partners have been working pretty seriously for the past 2 years to try to get this across the finish line. And some good news is that we've passed in the Senate, and another good piece of news is that we have a lot of co-sponsors in the Assembly. But one of the things that we just haven't been able to get that across the finish line. So we're really excited to be talking to everybody about making sure and getting involved and talking to friends and family about what's been going on about this bill, and that there is a chance and possibility for things to change.
Does it help to contact your local New York State senator, or is this a national senator we're talking about?
Great question. So this is really specific just to New York. Right now, this bill only applies to New York State. So this is not something that is federal, but it is pretty, it's really just New York State. So it would be your assembly member, it would be your state senator, and it would be the governor of New York, to just kind of really letting everybody know that this is something that is important to you. Any and all of us are susceptible to needing temporary disability insurance. As you said, if you are break your wrist and you are typing all day long and you can't work because of that, you would be taking something like TDI. And then other aspects of it too is that there are so many different mental health issues that people need to take time off of work in order to take that time off to recover. And that is something that is also really critical, is just also sharing with people around your friends and family. And in terms of that too, I think I've maybe have said this before, but I did case management and I had never heard of TDI. I had only heard of paid family leave, and just kind of sharing that knowledge with as many people as possible too. But I can get into that a little bit more later. If Jesse, if you want to go to the next slide. I think one of the big questions we get asked is, how is this related to workers' comp? And is there any relationship between workers' comp and TDI? And the main distinction there is that if you are injured for any on-the-job injury, you're taking workers' comp. If it's off the job, you're taking temporary disability insurance. So those are the two main things to keep in mind, is that if it's something that happens on the job, workers' comp, and if it's off the job, you would be taking TDI. And workers' comp also does cover any kind of psychiatric harm that might come from your work, but that is just another little piece to keep in mind, that it is not, this really doesn't have anything to do with workers' comp. It is just raising the level and the benefits offered through the TDI program. And so Jesse, if you can go to the next slide as well. And I think one of the things that we were talking about is like, well, we see in New York that we're in like the very, very last place in terms of offering paid medical leave benefits for workers across the state. We have this bill, we have all these things teed up, like how can we get this across the finish line? And I think this is something that is really an important piece to just connect with all of you, is really like what we need is people to continue to tell their stories, to speak to their representatives, to tell your friends, and also just be plugged in on the campaign with us. What I have here is a QR code, and I can put the link in the chat too, of just writing a letter to your state senator and your assembly member and the governor. And that can help people, that just will help make your voices heard in terms of saying like, this is a bill, this is something that's really important to you as your constituent. We are really hoping that you can do something about this to let people know that you're paying attention. And I'm going to add this in the chat in just a second. And, you know, another thing too, is if you have anything that you would like to share with us or want to be involved in any other capacity, like please feel free. I'm going to put my email in the chat to reach out to me or Jesse or any of us. And I think that is really kind of, we wanted to save some time for people in case they had questions. Because I know that this is really a lot of information, and it's a lot of information all at once. And wanted to kind of make sure that people, and like, feel free to ask any question at all. Just come off mute or put it in the chat or whatever works for you guys.
So
And thank you all.
we don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. I do want to highlight that disparity again, if you want to bring that slide up, especially around pregnant persons. One of the more heartbreaking stories from our advocacy work has been the individual who's suffered pregnancy loss at birth and was unfortunately not qualified for paid family leave, but qualified for TDI. So on top of the lack of job protections, the decreased amount of money hitting that person at that extremely rough time. So from NAMI's perspective, it's a huge thing for helping folks deal with grief, deal with their health issue overall. But for a number of folks who are going, the detox is the 3 days, and then the inpatient stay is the 28 days for substance use disorder. There are also people who can be inpatient mental health stays for between a week to 2 or 3, but there's also trauma retreats that are really day-long intensive or partial hospitalization programs. As they noted, that is covered under this bill. I guess one of my questions for you all is, what percentage of the population do you think even knows they can take TDI? Has that been one of the problems with getting people to fight for it to be increased? Is a lot of people, even when they qualify, don't know they can take it.
Yeah, I can kick that off. I think that's a really, really significant problem. And I think part of that is kind of coupled with a lot of us might be familiar with paid family leave. When I was doing case management, I knew what paid family leave was. I knew kind of how to direct people into how to take it, but I didn't understand that paid family leave was not for if you yourself have any kind of illness, injury, or any other serious condition, like you need to be going to PHP or partial hospitalization program or an IOP or anything like that, even methadone treatment. I just thought that paid family leave was for everybody. And then I still think that there is just like a real lack of knowledge, in part because this program is so unworkable. $170 a week with no job protection, no intermittent leave, and no health insurance. Some people cannot take that. So they are forced to go to work because the risk of losing your job, your health insurance, your wages is simply too much, particularly in really stigmatized health conditions as well. So I think that that is like another really large issue, is that sometimes people don't know about it because, and part of the reason why people might not know about it is because it's not a real workable program. So I think it is, I don't know. I mean, I think that percentage question is really interesting. And it is, the other issue too, is just that like sometimes people do not have the option to take it because the option of TDI is so bad and so low that they can't. But I will also let Jesse chime in if I've missed anything.
No, I think what you said really hits it. And we've just found that awareness in general is one of the major obstacles that we're dealing with here.
If anyone would like to come off mute and ask any questions.
What is the best thing we can do to try to push this along?
I think some of the best things that you can do is really to let your state lawmakers know that this is something that you have heard about. Maybe you've taken it yourself. You're outraged to hear that this is something that exists and is stuck in this wild wage replacement rate of $170 a week, and you're kind of forcing people to choose between their jobs and their financial security, their health and their financial security. So really anything, calling your legislator, calling your assembly member, calling your senators, sending them those letters. And also, you know, I think on a larger scale, if you have any interest in anything, right, like telling your story publicly or writing anything, to just obviously feel free to let us know, but really just kind of verbalizing and spreading the word, not only to your elected officials, but other people in your life. Because we do need people to, part of the thing that has been hard is that, as James mentioned, a lot of people don't even know that this is a program that exists. And so that's part of it. And in any kind of advocacy, and I can let Jesse and James also chime in as well.
I would just say we invite everybody to join. We've been taking trips to Albany to advocate for this issue. We've had press conferences there and meetings with lawmakers, and we would invite anybody to join us with those. NAMI has been a really amazing partner on this campaign, and we have been building momentum over the last couple years. I do think awareness is slowly growing. So any participation, whether it's calling or joining us, would be great.
That does lead me to one of my other questions. And we've mentioned pregnancy groups, we've mentioned NAMI groups, but what other partners are there in this coalition?
I can start off with that too. We've been working with a lot of other health specific groups. So the American Cancer Society has been a really big partner here, particularly when we're talking about the need for obviously health insurance, job protection, and intermittent leave. For example, just to kind of give a little bit of another example of the importance of intermittent leave, is that if you're battling cancer, you might your first week, you might need to take 3 days off of work, or 2 days off of work, or 1 day off of work, for treatment, another day for recovery, and then you're ready to go back to work for the rest of the week. And then maybe you're ready to go back to work until your next treatment, which is in 4 weeks. So just that, those chunks of like, you may only need to be going to the doctor once a week, every 4 weeks, something like that. So they've been a really big partner. We've also been working with the New York Civil Liberties Union and Citizen Action. We have some partners in labor as well. And just because the other piece of this is that it's a broad coalition because any of us are susceptible to needing to take temporary disability insurance. And it is a pretty far-reaching coalition. We've also been working with Small Business Majority because this is impactful for small businesses who maybe would like to provide their workers with the ability to take comprehensive leave, but are not able to because it is cost prohibitive because we don't have a larger infrastructure. So it's been pretty big and broad. And we've been working with Legal Aid Society as well, and a lot of other groups actually.
And the American Lung Association, the MS Society, it's really spanned a number of health issues, and that kind of leads me to another question that you've kind of covered already. What is the disparity between larger businesses and smaller businesses? Would this help smaller businesses be able to offer more to their workers than, say, as one commenter's case noted, there's some larger companies that might offer additional TDI or a way to tuck extra money away. Is there a disparity between smaller businesses and larger businesses in some areas?
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse. I've been talking a lot.
I'm happy to take this one, but yeah, we have, I think it's a really good point to bring up, James, and we have one of the main areas of opposition for this bill is cost, and it's coming from the business community. And so highlighting the ways that this is really helpful for businesses, small businesses and large businesses, but especially small businesses that have trouble competing with bigger businesses who can offer really comprehensive benefits is is a very important thing to lift up here. It's beneficial to small businesses in multiple ways. So it's beneficial in that it allows them to offer more comprehensive benefits because they're not paying the benefits, they're only paying the premiums for the benefits. So if all a worker can get is $170 a week, that's not much of a benefit. If they're able to get 67% of their pay like they are through paid family leave, that's a much more that's a benefit people actually want, and it's would be offered for any worker in the whole state. So I think it's very helpful for small businesses in that way, but it's also helpful in that workers like these paid leave benefits are very important, and I don't want to say popular among workers, but like having good benefits is a really important part of employment. So if it makes small businesses able to say, like, if you work here, you're able to access these benefits like everyone else, or like you would be at a larger business. And then I also think somebody brought this up a little bit earlier, but it does help people stay in the workforce. So if somebody needs to take short-term disability and then isn't able to and that ends up turning into a need for longer-term disability because a person wasn't able to take care of the short-term need, then oftentimes people have to leave the workforce rather than being able to take the short-term disability when it's needed and then come back to the workforce. So that's another way that we talk about it around like how it is beneficial for businesses. Is there any other talking point there that you would want to name, Mariah, around the benefits for businesses?
Yeah, I think you really covered it in the last piece I would add is that I think it's just very helpful I think it was very hard for businesses to have to like let somebody go because the cost is too high to keep their health insurance continued. And I know we've heard from a couple of people who've said that that's been really challenging for small businesses, because anything can happen and people do get sick, they do get seriously ill, and just being able to offer that as another form of protection is a win-win thing for businesses and workers alike, particularly when our small businesses are such a critical part of our communities. So I think that's just the final added piece.
That made me think of one more piece too. So for small businesses that want to be able to offer more, some small businesses do pay, many businesses pay above TDI because $170 a week is unlivable. So many businesses are offering better benefits, and this allows them to not have to do that. That they're able to just rely on the state program rather than having to be paying for, above that $170 a week. Like we hear from a lot of people who work at places that maybe compensate at like half their pay or 3/4. And so then the employer's chipping in for that, and they wouldn't need to do that if this were a state. It raises the floor on what everyone is able to provide.
Yeah, and I think just that piece there is that this is what we're proposing for, what we're proposing is the state minimum. So employers are more than welcome to go above what we're suggesting the law be, what the improvements are. So this is really just like the floor, and anybody can go above and beyond that.
As I said earlier, I was lucky enough that I worked at a company that had a special program where you got your paycheck if you became disabled until you were approved for long-term disability. And there was also a company involved that fought for your long-term disability. So there are programs like that. Like I worked for Turner Networks, and there are programs like that at bigger companies, but I don't think that a smaller company could afford to do that kind of a benefit.
Yes, exactly. I also think, just on this topic of businesses, we've found that this is a place where awareness is really low. So people, when we talk about TDI, employers and small business owners think that we're saying that they're going to be paying for the benefit, and that's not at all what's happening. It's paying for the insurance premiums, and those premiums are relatively low. They're again, what we're proposing in the bill that we have currently, it's split between employers and employees. So it's a 60-40 split where employers would be paying 60% and employees would be paying 40%. And like I said earlier, employees pay 100% of the premiums for paid family leave. But it's not that anyone is paying out the actual benefits. We're just talking about the insurance premiums, which I think is also important to understand, especially since New York does operate the paid family and medical leave programs differently than many other states. Many other states operate it as a fund.
So we'll open up for any last minute questions.
We really appreciate everyone's time. I know this topic, it's important, but it can sometimes be a bit complicated, and it's not something that we want to be thinking about all the time necessarily, but I really appreciate you all taking the time to listen to us today.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you
Thank you.
for presenting. Hopefully we'll still get a number of viewers on our recording. We had a lot of people sign up, so I think there's some interest. As we close out, I'll just put the link in the chat for our next policy lunch and learn. It'll be focused on mental health courts. And that'll take place the first Monday of the month, October 6th at 1 p.m. We will not have another one in November. We're encouraging everyone to go to our education conference that month. But all of these lunch and learns will be posted to our advocacy page at NYS.org. And if you feel like you would like to hear this information again, or if you missed a portion of it, feel free to check out the recording. If there's someone that you know who might benefit from knowing this information, please feel free to share the link with them so that they can view this information and hopefully get access to the number to a better balance to get some help for them as they navigate the system, because as they noted, it's a little bit complex applying problems.
What is
Thank
the
you all for
NAMI
coming today.
event
We're going
in
to turn off the
November?
recording now.